That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Episode 15. 5 more away and we'll be at the big 2-0. Oh.
So at what point do we just start counting by fives?
Maybe now. I mean, this is episode 15. So, yeah, I think that's fair.
20 and then 25. Because I'm like, we don't want to be sitting there going, this is episode 121.
First of all, we have a hard enough getting the count right most days anyway, so let's not do that. So that's a good suggestion.
I mean, honestly, we could just start just not counting them. And
yeah, for the sake of, posting them, we'll count them.
Yeah.
That's fair. Anyway, welcome back to everybody. Wait. What? Sports. He purposely bit the inside of his lip so he wouldn't say it. Come on.
I saw that. He was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Can't make me do it. I refuse to do it. Can't make me do it.
You do know it's my job to produce the show.
Yeah, but you contribute enough to where you can be part of the title sequence.
Yeah, well, I mean,
plus it always
I'm in
sounds
charge
better.
of looking up facts and stuff. Well, you got Amy here as the encyclopedia. So yeah,
so let's try this again. Back to the beginning.
Well, anyways, it always sounds better when it has that little bit of male base to it.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
okay.
Proceed.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Wait. What? Sports. Okay, we'll take it. He did it. Anyway.
He did it. He may not have been as enthusiastic as sometimes, but, whatever.
We'll take it.
We will. And just so everybody knows, we're doing something slightly different with our format because in the past, the first, 13, 14 episodes or so, at least the first 12, Gina had previously come to me with particular questions on particular sports, and I would flesh out a show. And look up all of her questions and make it into, something where we have all the answers to the things that she's already asked. We've hit a point where we have a topic that we want to talk about, but Gina doesn't even know what questions to ask.
I don't. It's really weird to be curious but not know how to be curious, if that makes sense.
It completely makes sense. As a librarian, let me tell you, that's actually one of the things that they teach us about is the fact that as a librarian, you are going to become the champion of playing 20 questions.
Oh, see, 20 questions isn't bad, Eli. Ha! So necessary.
So because people come to you as a librarian knowing that they need something, but not knowing exactly what it is, because otherwise they would find it on their own.
Right.
Or they need something and they can't exactly find it. So that's kind of where we are with our form. And don't you dare ding the bell on me, Eli.
Put that down.
That is where we're kind of going with our format today, because we want to celebrate a Cleveland legend. Because his actual day is coming up.
Yes.
And he's a name that's known in Cleveland and sometimes other parts of the American League, but he's not so well known nationally.
Right. In comparison to his
Fortunately. Right, because where we're going with this is that we're going to talk about the Negro Leagues, and we're going to talk about the two men who broke the color barrier in their respective leagues. One is very well known.
Yes.
The other one is not so well known.
I already have a question. I'm writing it down. Oh, we didn't do the most important part. I'm Gina, and you are?
Amy.
And that is?
Dr. Robinson.
Yeah, he can't wait to introduce himself that way.
We're going to have to get him a shirt at some point that's embroidered.
It has like a stethoscope on it.
Or that's embroidered. It will have a stethoscope attached to a baseball.
That would be so cool. I like that. You're clever. clever Cleve over there. Okay.
So, anyway, today, yes, Gina and I and Dr. Robinson.
Because we won't be able to help yourself just because of the subject matter.
We'll be talking about the Negro League and a little bit about Jackie Robinson, but more towards Larry Doby because it's Larry Doby Day on July 5th.
Yeah.
And Larry Doby is a name that most people don't know. And honestly, I didn't even know it until the then Indians, the tribe, got to I think it was the Central League Division Championships the very first time in the 90s.
Okay.
When they started pointing out these particular people and things. more so on TV than they did before.
Okay.
Because they don't talk about things like this so much when your team isn't winning very well.
Yeah, they're probably like, we have more important things to talk about versus like,
Or, there's not a ton of celebration done around things. And I wasn't a big ballpark person back before the 90s because I grew up way, way out in the eastern suburbs.
It's too much to get downtown.
Well, honestly, funny enough, where I went to high school was very easy to get to downtown, but it was still a long way.
Yeah.
It just wasn't like it was difficult. But you had not so much attention on the team, so not so much attention was put into the history of it. Now, I may have had a different experience had I grown up in the city or even in Cuyahoga County. But I'm not certain.
I mean, I could say just from, even though I don't follow sports from the same degree. Eli, maybe you can give your opinion on it. But I don't think even in inner city Cleveland, Larry Doby is like celebrated or discussed nearly as much as he should be.
And definitely not as much as Jackie Robinson.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. You'll see people walking around with a Jackie Robinson jersey, and I've never seen anybody wearing a Larry Doby jersey.
Well, I mean, there is some historical information on Larry Doby Day. If you go to League Park.
Yeah.
Right
around
Which,
the corner
by the
from
way,
me.
did Gina tell you
I did
yesterday?
Not. Sorry.
You hold down on me?
I texted Gina on Thursday that Saturday they were actually doing historical talks and tours of League Park.
What?
You weren't even in town. Whatever.
Okay, so she has a pass because you weren't in town. Okay, I did not know that you weren't in town.
He was at Norwalk watching the drag race.
Oh, okay, he was at the drag races. Gotcha. But yes,
I did forget to tell him anyway.
they were doing these, and I had to work. Otherwise, I would have gone because I wanted to know more about League Park and all of that.
Well, you can go up there anytime.
You can, but they
had a celebration.
A celebration, and they had throughout the day they had different sports historians.
That's so cool.
Giving talks about the different sports in Cleveland and the different sports facilities and the history of the teams and the sports and everything for Cleveland. And I was like, oh, and I only found out about it on Thursday, and I was like, no.
I have to work.
Because there were so many cool things going on in Cleveland this week.
That would have been awesome.
That would have been. We just have to take like a personal Wait What sports field trip day and just go.
Well, and like I said, that this particular weekend, they were doing things all throughout downtown and all throughout Cleveland to celebrate Cleveland and Cleveland's local history. And that was one of the things. And I was like, oh, sports history. I can't go.
Yeah. Oh.
So I passed the word along hoping that somebody else could.
Everybody had plans.
Everybody else was busy too. So, okay, we'll start with this. We all know who Jackie Robinson is.
Of course.
Right.
We all know what he did, correct?
Right.
Anybody else want to fill that in so it's not just me talking?
So Jackie Robinson, is it the National League?
Yes.
He broke the color barrier for the National League with the LA. Was he on the LA Dodgers at the time?
So it wasn't
He didn't
LA
start
at the time.
there.
It was the Brooklyn Dodgers.
It was the Brooklyn Dodgers at the time. They
okay.
had not moved to LA.
Gotcha. I knew it was the Dodgers.
And he actually broke the color barrier for all of Major League Baseball.
Right.
But the National League specifically.
Gotcha.
So he was the very first, and I'll put it this way, known African American to play in the major leagues.
So were there African Americans before him?
It's possible. There were a few natives. But it's possible because how many people were passing as well?
Oh, that's true. Touche. That is a very good point.
So that's why I'm saying he was the first
known, recorded. Yeah.
Which takes nothing away from him.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because if you are, as one of my very good friends said to me, melanin challenged as I am.
You know what? I'm going to ding your friend for saying that.
I mean, it's a good way to describe it.
He told me I couldn't help the fact that I was melanin challenged. But if you are somebody who could pass, you would, and nobody would ever know.
Right.
And therefore, unless you came out the same way that, nobody ever knew about LGBTQ players,
right,
until somebody came out
and was like, I'm tired of hiding, or whatever the case
right.
might have been. And
unless you came out, there was no way to know that you were the first or that you broke the color barrier. And quite frankly, if you're passing and you don't come out, the people who hired you just assume they hired a white man.
Exactly.
So, until you do and something happens. So, Jackie Robinson was the first in Major League Baseball for the Dodgers. Larry Doby. And I did bring the new children's book.
I will be getting that book for myself, but also for my nephews.
About Larry Doby. It's called All-Star, How Larry Doby Smashed the Color Barrier in Baseball. And it starts out talking about how he grew up and where he grew up, and how when he grew up, in the 1930s,
late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, late 20s, early 30s, he dreamed of playing baseball, but he knew that he would never be able to play as the league was at that time, because he was black. But there's a great spread in here that talks about how when he stepped up to the plate to play with the neighbor kids in his interracial neighborhood, which was also very unusual.
Yeah.
In his head, he dreamed of playing for the Dodgers and hearing, now batting, natting, for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Larry, Harry.
Doby.
Okay, Eli is looking at us all crazy, but it's literally written out that way in the book.
But that's how you hear it, though. Think
And
about
that's
people
how you
chanting
imagine
for
it.
you.
That's how you hear it, but you don't have to pronounce it like.
Yes, you
Oh,
do.
God.
It's written.
in the book exactly
Okay,
that
all
way.
right, okay. I'll give you a pass on that. Okay.
Tell the children's librarian how to do story time.
Right. How dare you, sir? Mute your mic.
It was already muted. Sorry.
So, anyways, he had this dream, and he knew he wasn't really going to be able to do
I
it.
can't imagine, like, dreaming of this thing my whole life. Like, I can't wait to be an adult and do it, and just know from a child, no matter how much I want it, no matter how good I am, I'll never get a chance to do it.
So, there were several things along his childhood that gave him hope.
Yeah.
First one, and you may know this. Have you heard of Joe Louis?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So there are people who don't know who Joe Louis is. So just to let you know, he was the black American boxer that took on Nazi Germany in the boxing ring. Okay.
Yep.
Max Schlemling was the gentleman that he fought, and he actually won.
Yep.
I mean, he didn't win all of his matches against Max, but he won the one that the world was watching and listening for. And as his family and the entire neighborhood listened to this fight, and everybody came out and celebrated, again, in his interracial neighborhood, it gave him hope that there was a possibility that he would get to play sports.
Yeah.
Actually, there is a movie called Joe and Max. Yeah, you gotta watch it.
And
I'm writing that down.
And there's actually a very good book about the entire thing. I believe it's called The War in the Ring.
The War in the Ring.
And it was written for teenagers, but it is a very good breakdown of the history of the two boxers. It traces their history and then what happened after the fight.
Yeah.
Because you would think after the fight, Joe would get really, really big and rich. And unfortunately, he did, but he didn't.
It's
He
complicated.
had the same problem a lot of sports stars have.
Yeah.
You get all the money and then you don't
Know what to do with it.
spend it or save it in the best of ways. And Max wound up getting a business venture that earned him quite an amount of money in his later years. Ooh, sorry. I know, yes.
The fact that you didn't even have to look up and you knew it was coming. Like, wait,
I
let me
know,
check mine.
I got dinged. I totally forgot to put my phone on silent. Sorry. So there was another part of his childhood, of Larry Doby's childhood, that I found very interesting from the book. And it was the fact that when he played football for his school, he wound up playing against another very famous person who became a first in his field, who also, as Larry would say later, had as much of a chance of getting to his first as I ever did of playing in the major leagues.
Who is this mysterious person?
And just to let you know, he was a white man. He got to play against Buzz Aldrin.
What? No. Stop.
So Larry Doby and Buzz Aldrin played against each other in high school football.
Buzz freaking Aldrin, the astronaut?
Yes.
I'm done. History is nuts. I'm just going to throw that out there.
So, I mean, yes, it's very, very weird, right?
Wow. Trendsetters.
So, to go on with Doby's, history, he actually had been drafted into the war.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was sitting there, peeling potatoes or whatever it was that he was doing, because most people of color were peeling potatoes in the war, let's be honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
He heard about Jackie Robinson getting drafted. And he knew there was a chance when he got back.
Wow. So at this point, was Jackie playing?
So Jackie had been drafted, but he was not playing in the majors.
Okay, I got you.
So he still had to do his minor league stuff.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Most players wind up in the minors for a while. So Larry knew when he came back from service that there was a chance that he could possibly play in baseball. When he came back, he started playing in the Negro Leagues again.
Okay.
Okay.
So he was playing in the Negro Leagues before he got drafted?
It's not entirely clear
Okay.
whether he was or not, but it said that he returned to the Eagles.
Gotcha.
In Newark. So, he was just putting on shows, trying to make sure that he got noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So, that same year, Jackie Robinson makes it to the majors.
Right.
And has all the famous issues that have been depicted in many, many places.
Right.
Because, as we know, change doesn't happen nicely. Or cleanly.
Ever.
And unfortunately, people aren't nice. But for Larry, he wound up meeting the owner of the Indians, Bill Veeck.
Okay.
Okay. And Larry later said that this man never showed him any prejudice or bigotry.
Wow. This is a lot for somebody to be in that position of power but not have that mindset.
Well, the same thing happened to Jackie Robinson when Branch Rickey,
Right.
the Dodgers. He didn't show any prejudice or anything. He just
Right,
saw
so
he
those
just
were
saw
the
a ball
first
player.
two owners to say, if you can play ball, you can play ball for me.
Right. And I don't care what skin color you are.
Right.
I remember
The problems come with the teammates.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually remember in the movie 42, when Harrison Ford played Branch Rickey, he after Jackie Robinson, he was upset about the Phillies coach calling him racial slurs at the plate.
Yeah.
So he went into the dugout, so angry, broke his bat and said, you know what, if one of them people say one more word, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna crack their head wide open.
Wow.
So Branch Rickey said this, and I'll never forget this. look at your people, look at all those people. You're medicine, Jack. You're like medicine. What you do out there is like medicine to them.
So it was the following off season after Jackie came to the majors that Larry Doby was signed with the Indians. And unlike Robinson, Doby never went to the minors. He went straight to the majors.
Oh, wow.
And
that's huge.
The interesting thing in this children's book is they actually depict him with his bat surrounded by the shadows of sharks to show
scary,
how
accurate,
much turmoil there was with the fact that he went straight to the majors because, as he put it, the world had not changed that much in 11 months. Again, it's not quick. It's not easy. There are, players on his team that refused to shake his hand. There were players on his team who turned their backs on him. He would go out to play catch and warm-ups, and nobody would play with him.
Same thing that happened to Jackie Robinson.
And all the same things happened. And, funny enough, there was a PBS special about Clemente earlier this year. Same things happening to him.
Wow.
When he came up, and they all, they didn't say that it was because of his skin tone or because of his culture, but they said it was because of the language barrier. They couldn't understand him.
Right.
But
because he was the
Let's
first,
be frank,
he was the first Latino.
Wow.
He was the one that broke the Hispanic barrier.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's so funny because we talk so much about Jackie Robinson and, in our case, Larry Doby, but you do have to think about other cultures coming in, being the first to break that line. Nowadays, when you think of baseball, I hate to say it, I think of people of Latino descent. Like, I don't think of black people or white people. I think of Latino people playing.
Right, and here's the thing.
Even Asian now, really.
Here's the thing is that, like, for years, it was considered the white man's game. And I don't know that it ever became a truly, or was thought of as a truly mixed race or, African-American game. It kind of, in popular thought, shifted from a white man's game to a Hispanic game.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And it all depends on how you define whiteness as well. Because the other thing about that is a lot of the Hispanic players are actually of African descent as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they're African Latinos.
And in Dominican
Republic.
Yeah, the Dominican, Haitians, Cubans, and those countries, and most South American countries, race is not pure white-black. Race is colorism. It's shades.
True.
Right.
The darker you are, the lesser you are. Wow. So it's really an interesting thing. Like I said, it depends on how you define whiteness. Because Clemente was not pure Latin, pure Spanish, Latin America. Clemente is a black man. He's just black Hispanic.
Interesting. But his name makes you go, oh, he's Hispanic.
Right. Well, and again, he spoke Spanish, like, Omar Vizquel, like a lot of, Rodriguez,
Jose
a lot of the
Ramirez,
a lot of the Latino players come straight up not speaking English. And he did, and he was the first to come up not speaking English. And it made a huge difference for how he was accepted or not accepted.
He just had a whole lot of stuff again. We could do a whole episode. We should make enough to do a whole episode on, like, not even just one sport, but like various sports. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So,
especially nowadays.
As we all know, and we hear about this with all the performers and everything, Sammy Davis Jr., everything. They can't, Sammy Davis couldn't eat in the hotels he performed in. He couldn't sleep in the hotels he performed in. Same thing with Larry Doby, Jackie Robinson. They couldn't eat with the team in a lot of places. They couldn't stay in the same hotel. In fact, some of the ballparks, they made them enter through the servants' entrance instead of the main entrance.
Yeah.
So it was very, very hard. But Larry eventually moved from infield to outfield.
Okay.
Became an incredible outfielder. And the picture that made things change, actually, and it's in the back of the book, came after the World Series game-winning walk-off home run.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
Which
I have
was
to
in
find that picture.
1948.
I have to find that picture to
I
post.
was trying to scan for the year.
Oh, sorry.
I couldn't find the year here. But
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
Oh, you're welcome.
Right, but it was in Game 4. He hit the game-winning walk-off home run. And the pitcher for the game, Steve Gromek, a white man, was photographed in the post-game celebration hugging Larry Doby, looking like little kids. I mean, honestly, this looks like a picture of my nephews playing with each other.
Oh, or that little video of like the little boy and the two little boys who run up and hug each other because they're so happy to see each other. That's exactly what I just got an image of.
And they like look like little kids celebrating like their first little league win. Right. Honestly. But it was groundbreaking to have a white man photographed with throwing his arms around a black man and celebrating. Unfortunately, in that picture, you also get to see the original Indians mascot, the original Chief Wahoo, which was way more racially based and more caricaturized than the Chief Wahoo that I grew up with. That is, no longer being used. And in fact, the Indian's name is no longer being used.
They toned it down like
they
a lot.
toned it down a lot.
Wow.
And again, we could at some point in time do a show on the history of the name of the team, because it was a name that was given in honor of one of the great players from the team. But times change. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate thing that some people don't necessarily understand is that you have to change with times.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
And the one thing, what's the saying? The one thing that's inevitable is change. There's nothing that you can do to stop it.
So that's the basics of why Larry Doby's important here. First off, he helped us win our last World Series.
And when was that? 1948? Oh my God, yo.
We're not going to talk about it.
Okay, yeah, you about to go into trauma.
The thing is, the Chicago series, I was so...
Oh, God.
So, I was like, if we're going to lose to anybody, at least it's Chicago, because they had, like, a worse time than we did with World Series and getting there and losing.
They didn't win a pennant, a World Series title since 1910 before they beat us.
What?
Yes. So, but I was like, but at least we didn't lose to like somebody who's been there 4 times in the last 5 years,
True.
Right?
We didn't lose to the Yankees.
Lose to Atlanta again.
Again.
The Yankees are part of our league, but
true.
But yes, we didn't lose to Atlanta again. Okay,
doggone rain delay.
So, but the Chicago series, like I said, at least it was Chicago that we had lost to. I like when we went into that series, I was like, I'm just going to be happy for one of these teams.
Somebody.
Ben Zobrist.
One of these teams,
Dr.
their
Robinson.
fans have been suffering for a very long time.
Right.
Unfortunately,
yes, you do,
it's that one, like 11 innings. I mean, we went forever in that game, and one score made the difference, unfortunately.
It only takes one.
We came so close. But, we'll get there again.
Eventually. Not this season, but eventually.
I'm sorry to have brought it up, Dr. Robinson. But
do you need a moment? You need some tissue? There's some on the table.
Let's move on.
Okay, we're moving on.
Yeah. So that's Larry Doby.
Yeah.
When I first started off, you were like, I got a question.
I do. Okay, so we all know Jackie Robinson's got a whole day. Everybody wears his jersey number. Like, it's a thing. There's nothing like that for Larry Doby, is there?
There is. So, actually, July 5th is Larry Doby Day.
Across the league?
In Cleveland.
See, that's what I wanted to know.
In Cleveland.
Okay.
Now, there have been periodic pushes to get it to be at least the American League.
Yeah, there's actually a petition out there.
Yeah.
Okay. You should find that for me, Dr. Robinson, so I can post it on our page.
So, like this year, because the thing is that I literally was listening to the radio yesterday, and there was a commercial for the Guardians on for their Larry Doby Day giveaways.
Ah, okay.
So if you go to the game that July, I don't know if they actually have a game on July 5th, but like that week, they have different things going on each day of the week. They've got one day with a Larry Doby bobblehead, and they've got a Larry Doby jersey day, and they've got, so like I said, I don't think it was ever anything that anybody really, really talked about until we had those World Series years.
And then it came back up in the conversation.
Right, because then you had, the Bob Feller stuff, and all the greats started getting their statues and everything else. So, I mean, to have this man who, again, helped us win our World Series, like, you can't stuff that back in history.
Exactly, pretend like it's not a thing.
Right. So, that's unfortunately, because he wasn't the first in the entirety of Major League, he doesn't get as much attention. But those seconds are just as important as the firsts.
Because who says that Jackie Robinson couldn't have been the one and only? I mean, depending on how life goes, we don't know how the future will move forward.
Okay, so we don't celebrate Neil Armstrong less than Buzz Aldrin.
True.
Or Michael Collins, for that matter, who didn't even step on the moon, but he was the one back at the shuttle making sure they were safe. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
We don't celebrate any of them less. I mean, Michael Collins isn't as well known, again, because his footstep isn't on the moon. But we don't celebrate them any less because they weren't the first.
Right.
And unfortunately, the seconds always seem to get pushed to the wayside.
Yeah. Until somebody brings it up and makes it. Yeah. Is there a Clemente Day?
In Philly? Is that where he played?
Is it still just like a city-based thing like Larry Doby Day?
He played in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, so in Pittsburgh. I couldn't remember which Pennsylvania town it was that he played in. I knew it was Pennsylvania. I couldn't remember if it was the Phillies or if it was the Pirates. I knew it was National League. I knew it was Pennsylvania. But yeah, in Pittsburgh, they have a Clemente Day.
I'm very surprised that, like, especially, I would think anybody who's the first of a cultural group, you would think that would be celebrated. But again, change is very slow sometimes.
Well, and again, a lot of times people don't necessarily think of Clemente as being a first.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
it's not as obvious.
Right.
As like, oh, there's a black guy. Like, I hate to say it that way, but it is what it is.
I mean, if I had showed up at a Negro League game, you'd be like, oh my God, there's a white girl there.
Absolutely correct, ma'am. Without thinking, word vomit would have just spewed forth.
It is unfortunately what it is.
Yeah.
So when you have a heterogeneous skin tone going on, the skin tone is very obvious.
Yeah.
Language
is obvious.
Should be obvious, but it's not something you can see.
True.
And for a while, Clemente decided just not to even deal with the press because there were so many issues getting translated properly.
Oh, so he wouldn't even say anything to them. Okay.
Because he was getting mistranslated.
Of course he was.
So,
which I can't even imagine what they were saying he was saying.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was just,
misquotes.
Nuances of the language
right.
can't be handled by somebody who learned it in 5th grade for 2 years.
Right. And thinks they can have like a very general, where's the bathroom kind of conversation, but I can completely translate what this man is saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And, back in the 70s and early 80s when he came over, there was no Google Translate. So
how the world has changed.
Nowadays, you just turn on your Google Translate, let it record, and it tells you what they said.
Right? So. Like, that's how people travel nowadays. Like, some people don't even bother to learn the language. They just literally have their phones, and they're like, they talk into the phone, and it tells them, which is kind of a sad state.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I find that kind of technology is very helpful in a lot of ways, even with my job, because I can't possibly know every language.
That's true.
And we
I'll
have
give
people
it
from
credit for
around the
that.
world coming into the area, and they
Yeah.
come into the libraries and they're asking for things. Also, with my patrons who are deaf or hard of hearing,
True.
it's quicker for me to speak into my phone and have Google translate my voice
Mm-hmm.
than it is for me to write down all my questions on paper.
Oh gosh, old school.
So we should probably transition into the Negro League stuff.
Yeah.
So I was going to see what questions you have, or see if Dr. Robinson wanted to put 2 cents in.
Okay.
I thought he was actually going to come in with something. He's like, oh, okay.
Okay. That was a little bit of a downer, a little bit of a letdown. But anyway, okay. So the Negro Leagues, like, what? Obviously, it wasn't as big as the MLB, but because of what it was, and it's just a whole bunch of black. Well, I guess the best question I could first ask is, was it only all black players in the Negro Leagues?
No, it
No.
it included Latin Americans, especially the Afro-Latinos.
Okay.
There was a Cuban team called the Cuban Giants.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
No, I did not know that.
And there were actually a couple of different Negro leagues that then eventually joined in to become one big league. The same way that there were several regional leagues for baseball that eventually became the National League, and then an American League formed, and then they became the major leagues.
So
we'll get into like real, Major League Baseball
mm-hmm.
nitty gritty history at some point in time,
Right.
and the history of the game. So they had, different parts of that.
So it sounds like the Negro Leagues are really for more of the marginalized groups who were talented enough to have been in Major League Baseball.
Yeah,
but at the time, it just, they weren't accepting of having
right.
melanated folks play in Major League Baseball. I mean, how else you want me to say it?
Yeah.
Because they weren't all black, so I can't say all black people. But anybody who was the other.
Right. I will say the exception, like I said before, was that there were Native American players already in the major league.
Yeah. Were there known Native American players in the major leagues, or were they passing?
They were
okay.
They were known.
Got it.
It's the weird thing about white America is, even as much as we villainized Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
we accepted them more than we did African Americans or any other group.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, every wave of immigration that came over from Europe, there was a fight against it. So for a while, Italians were villainized.
Yes.
And
Heavily. They still are to a great degree, I'll say that.
Honestly, the ones that got it the worst were the Irish.
Okay. That's fair.
They, as far as European groups went, up until World War I, when Germans became the big, massive issue, the Irish were depicted as lazy, drunk, dirty, scheming thieves. But really, you wouldn't have the railroads without the Irish and the African Americans.
True.
And
later on down the line, Asian populations as well.
Right, especially on the West Coast, the Asian populations. And again, every wave of Asian immigrants that came over were villainized.
Yeah.
As much as, again, we villainized Native Americans and we stole all their land and we tried to do all these horrible things to them.
Right.
It was more accepted than other groups.
It makes me wonder what it is about the Native Americans that made them just be a little bit more above the rest of the others.
So there are 2 things that I personally think.
Okay.
Just being somebody who's studied history. first off, I think there was some amount of respect for how much of a fight Native Americans put up, especially towards the end of everything and the reservations and all that. 2, government programs to... There's no good way to put this. I'm going to put this the way I feel about it. Steal Native American children and re-educate them to white man standards in residential schools that were horrible, and they treated them very badly. And there's lots of movies and documentaries about this.
I was just about to say, I watched one a couple months, maybe last year, about those residential schools.
So there was a whole series last fall during Native American History Month that was on PBS. And then Education of Little Tree is one of the major movies. And in Canada, they had a similar system, and they are just now finding mass graves at a lot of these school sites where parents never knew what happened to their children because they were taken away to be re-educated. The kids would never come back regardless.
Right.
Because they lost all of their history. They lost all of
their language, their
culture, everything. And I think because these children and these schools started in right after the Civil War, as the Indian Wars were going on.
Right.
These children in the early 1900s were so white bread, for lack of a better term,
if you will. Yeah.
They were, quote, Americanized
enough to be accepted.
Especially if they did not have incredibly striking particular looks.
Yeah.
So, it was just unfortunate. I think that those two things worked to help that.
Gave them a bit of an advantage.
A small one, because that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
As far as, what made the difference between that and, say, a Chinese immigrant or, an African American. There's several other small things for African Americans that could lead up to a bigger difference. But, unfortunately, our history is the way our history is.
Yeah.
And we can't really change it. But we can learn about it, and we can learn from it and hope that we don't have somebody, going the other way.
Right. So, okay, back to, that was very heavy, but it needed to be discussed because it is part of why the Negro Leagues existed. Was the Negro League sponsored by the MLB, or was this a completely separate entity that formed on its own accord?
Completely separate.
Yep.
Okay.
Formed actually by black businessmen. It was black players for black entertainment. That's all it was.
Wow. Interesting. So, okay, did it become a threat to MLB at some point? Like, what caused the demise, I guess, of the Negro Leagues?
Jackie Robinson being accepted into the league.
And now that we can play in their league, we don't necessarily need our own league.
Right. Once they started, it was the Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby was the start.
Okay.
Okay. And that start wasn't, these are two, and here's a flood.
Right.
And you had more players like Satchel Paige coming in.
Right. And, it was a trickle, and you had... It was kind of like how the historically black colleges and universities went from being powerhouses in football to not.
Mm-hmm.
And you can trace that back to all of a sudden the big names in football like Ohio State and all of that started recruiting black players instead of not accepting them.
Right.
So,
which ultimately boils down to a business decision.
Right. And unfortunately, there came a point where you have so many players that are actually getting drafted into the major league that you can't actually field as much.
Right.
And if you're getting drafted and you're being allowed to play in the minors, well, the Negro League isn't even necessarily a minor league for them anymore.
Right.
So,
just all these forces kind of coming together in a perfect storm to kind of, this is totally not even needed anymore. Although it would be interesting to see if there would have been a continuation of the Negro League, where it would have gone.
So, in fact, on the history of the Negro League site that I have up, it talked about how there were ideas floated by Major League Baseball to keep the league as a developmental league for black players so that they didn't have to play on minor league teams in heavily segregated areas.
Yeah. I mean, that was actually a pretty admirable idea, I have to say. Like, because I think at the end of the day, when those teams, even at that era, you're investing in that player. So do you take the risk of putting them in an area where people could possibly kill them after you've invested your time, your energy, your money into now drafting this player? So I can see why that would be an argument to be had. Like, we have to protect our investment. And we know that if we put them in these environments, there's a good chance something might happen to them. There's a very likely chance something might happen. So that's interesting. I don't say this very often about those kind of things, but I sort of think that would have been a smart move on their part for the sake of protection of the player from the rest of the population.
Yeah. So, the Hall of Fame didn't officially recognize the Negro Leagues for quite some time.
You said last episode, you said it was after even the Women's League was recognized, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find the exact date here because in this article it talks about all the different times that people pushed
to get it
in there.
Okay.
So I'm kind of scanning it just to make sure I don't miss it.
Yeah. So how many, like from what you're seeing, was there a lot of instances of people being like, why this needs to be included? This is part of baseball, not MLB, but baseball history in this country.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, in 1966, Ted Williams made a plea for including Negro League players into Hall of Fame as individual players.
Not just the league in general.
The league in general.
Okay.
And there was another push in the 70s.
Okay.
And the Hall of Fame had started in the 70s planning a separate but equal display. That would be similar to what they have for baseball commentators.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
There's a baseball commentators in there?
Yeah, there's baseball commentators in the Hall of Fame. Just like in the NFL Hall of Fame, there are football commentators.
Fair enough.
Press members. But the fans didn't go for it. So...
Still a sign of the times, I suppose.
Right. So in 1971... it looks like they started allowing Negro League players to be admitted as individual players.
Okay.
But I believe it was after the League of Their Own stuff that they actually got their own like wing on the Hall of Fame, where that you actually have a hall that you can go into to learn about the league in total.
Oh, okay.
By the way, if you go to the African American History Museum,
I can't wait to go there one
in D.C.
Yes.
There is an entire floor that is African American sports history.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That place is huge, though. So
they have an incredible statue of Jesse Owens, by the way.
I can't wait to go there one day.
When I was in 6th grade, our class took a trip up to Detroit to the African American History Museum. Mm-hmm. And I was the only kid to actually get a Negro League poster of all, like, every facts of everything, you know, with Negro Leagues.
Yeah.
They had their own section.
But you know what? I think that's an interesting commentary because things like that aren't even... We all know the way they're trying to change American history and how it's being taught. But that's a commentary on the fact that you might have been one of the only kids who actually knew the importance of that.
Yeah.
And was like, this is cool, and we should want to take a poster home and acknowledge, like, this is awesome. Guys, we had an entire league that was just, you know, melanated folks. I mean, obviously you didn't see it that way as a kid, but still.
My dad, when I brought that poster home, my dad was proud of me because, you know, a lot of kids, you know, because I went to a public school.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids didn't actually know about the Negro Leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of the first kids to actually bring a poster back.
That's really cool.
To put it on my wall.
By the way, as he mentioned Satchel Paige joined the Indians, and that was his first major league team in 1948, the same year that we won the...
Yeah.
So Satchel Paige and Larry Doby were on the same team at the same time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. First of all, I thought Satchel Paige came way after that. So that's amazing to me.
So, and even in this book, they didn't talk about Paige, but they talked about Willie Mays.
Yeah.
Which I have to laugh because whenever I think of Willie Mays, all I can think of is Willie Mays Hayes.
Yes.
From League of Their Own. But
I get that reference now.
Larry Doby knew Willie Mays, and he said that Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby go hand in hand because of how much they had to go through in order to play.
Yeah. I have to look this up. I wonder if there's ever a history of the two of them kind of getting together and being like, sharing their experience as one. Because of the fact that they went through it at similar times.
Yeah, I mean, you might find a couple of pictures.
I'm sure they probably met each other somewhere along the way.
Then you had players like Willie McCovey, Hank Aaron, coming along and whatnot. Hank Aaron's he's one of my favorite players.
Yeah.
Him and Ken Griffey Jr.
Well, I know you love Ken Griffey. I would love to see I don't know. I guess I would love to see how. Do you guys think there's still some of that inbred racism in professional baseball?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
I mean, really, it's
just more subtle
truly
now.
Seen as a white man's game.
I can say that's true because, just growing up in inner city Cleveland, I never thought of any black players ever playing. You don't think of anybody that's not white playing baseball.
Right. Because
that's a white person's game.
In the black community, I just got to say this because baseball is obsolete now. Because you don't see a lot of
It is practically obsolete. Yeah. Yes. First off, equipment. Although football equipment is pricey too, but there's lots of places where they you can reuse pads every year for a particular age group.
Yeah.
And they just sanitize them and give them out to a different set of kids. But bats are expensive, and
gloves.
Once you find a bat, that's your bat, and gloves are expensive.
Yeah.
And Little League, but although Little League truly everywhere is dying slightly,
right?
Kids have gotten more into soccer.
Yeah.
Soccer's become way big, or football.
I was going to mention this. When I was, I'm sorry to cut you off. When I was working with the Indians back in 2011 as in corporate and as an intern, they partner up with the Cleveland Baseball Federation, and we had this big giant tub where people, when you come to the ballpark, people just donate your gloves and they just give it to the Cleveland Baseball Federation. I believe they still do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe from time to time they've got, different things, different times when you can donate materials. And that's the thing is that, that's part of the reason why baseball started trying to change some of its rules.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a giant divide between the, quote, traditionalists and those who are for the rule changes, because a lot of the rule changes are to bring more, quote, energy into the game.
Okay.
They are meant to make the game faster, quote, more exciting.
Right. Yeah.
And the traditionalists are like, man, you're messing up my baseball because now you're saying that, they might do sudden death after 9 innings.
Right. Well,
that was one of the proposals a couple of years ago was after 9 innings, we do our traditional 9 innings. We do 3 more innings and then it's a sudden death inning.
If it just keeps going over.
Right. And I've said this time and time again on our other show, Quad Brothers. Baseball has a swag problem.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Baseball has a serious swag problem.
And the thing is, that swag problem came in after they started busting for the PEDs that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
After they started cracking down on PEDs and all of that,
yeah,
they lost the excitement of having somebody who would slug the ball. And the other problem is kids have been taught to do nothing but hit for that home run.
Yep.
Right.
And that's all that they're going for. So there's not a lot of small ball. And
Right.
people think small ball is just not exciting, but small ball is what wins you the game.
Are you kidding me? Like when that shortstop is like right there, that's not, those are the exciting parts to me. Like, yeah, home runs are cool, but then it's like, well, that was it. All right.
So that's the sound to tell us that we've got 5 minutes because we were actually on track that time.
Yeah, I'm so proud of us. No, not so many tangents this time around.
Well, and the tangents were things that had to do with things that had
True.
to be talked about and whatever. So, anyways, we are very glad that you joined us. We hope that you enjoyed our slightly rambling.
I don't think this one was as rambly. I think it was very focused, and it did touch on, even though it was primarily supposed to be about Larry Doby. It's amazing how all these other things do tie into the Larry Doby story and the story of baseball in general, and how you can't have sports without talking about all the other people on the outside who were excluded from the sport and then came into the sport and changed how the game was played.
You realize when we get to football, we have to talk about Jim Thorpe.
I don't even have
anyways.
no clue who that is. So yeah, if you say so, boss.
We'll get into why he's important and what he did and how he changed things for football at some point in time.
I love history.
See, this is the thing, is I'm trying to get you to truly, absolutely love that part of the game, the history part of things.
I'm getting there.
We are thankful that you guys have joined us. We hope that you've enjoyed everything that we've done so far. We do still encourage you to reach out to us.
Please, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, through Spotify. Please leave a 5-star comment, 5-star review, and a comment on our show on Spotify.
However you have been getting information about us, that's where you can find us.
Right.
And we really do look forward to getting some questions from you guys because it will make it very interesting for us to know what you actually have questions about, especially if we mentioned anything in this show that we didn't really get to fully dive into that you want to know more about.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next time. We are going to be talking about Wimbledon and the history of tennis.
All right. Do our best. On that note, I'm Gina.
I'm Amy.
Come on, Dr. Robinson. Wow. Ding yourself. Do it.
Dr. Robinson.
Ding it. Ding it before we go off the air. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.